The strong man is the one who is able to intercept at will the communication between the senses and the mind. Napoleon Bonaparte. It's easy to be composed when life is calm, when no one's criticizing you, when no one's pushing your buttons, when the world makes sense and your image is intact. But that's not the test. That's just comfort. The test comes when you get punched, not physically, though that's part of it, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. When someone calls you out, when she disrespects you, when life embarrasses you in front of others, when you feel exposed, like your mask is cracking, who are you then? That's the question, because that's when most men lose control. Not because they're evil, not because they're broken, but because they've never trained for that moment. They've trained for success, not resistance. They've trained for image, not impact. So when pressure comes, what's really inside comes out. And what comes out? Anger, insecurity, panic, ego. But true masculinity, the kind that earns trust, respect, and influence, is only revealed when the pressure's on. When something provokes you, and you choose not to break. Any man can be stoic when everything is going his way, but the man who can stay grounded when everything's falling apart, that's the man other people follow. That's the man women trust. That's the man who becomes unshakable. Let's talk about Will Smith at the Oscars. For decades, he was seen as the model man. Charming, composed, wise, a role model in the eyes of millions across generations. But in one moment, that image cracked. Chris Rock made a joke that hit a nerve. It wasn't the harshest joke. It wasn't violent, but it touched something deep inside Will. Something unhealed, something personal. And in front of the world, he got up, walked across the stage, and slapped him. On live television, at the biggest awards ceremony in Hollywood. It was shocking. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was out of character. This wasn't some reckless 20-year-old. This was Will Smith. A man who spent years building his image, his legacy, his reputation. And in 10 seconds, it all changed. Because it wasn't just the slap. It was the fact that in that moment, emotion took control. Ego took the wheel. And the inner storm spilled into the world. Afterwards, he apologized. He cried. He tried to explain. And everyone saw the truth. He's not a villain. He's not evil. He's a man who never got trained to lead himself when his emotions got triggered. And it hurt to watch. Because in that moment, we saw ourselves. We saw how easy it is to throw it all away when the pressure touches your deepest wound. Here's what I want you to remember. Will Smith didn't fall because he was weak. He fell because he was unprepared. And that's the danger. For all of us. Because one outburst, one breakdown, one slip of emotional discipline can destroy what you've spent years building. Your reputation, your business, your relationship, your self-respect. Gone in one moment. Not because you're broken, but because no one taught you how to anchor yourself when the waves hit. So why does this happen? Why do strong men, disciplined, accomplished, respected, still crack under emotional pressure? It's not just character. It's science. Here's what you need to understand. When something threatens your ego, a public insult, disrespect from a partner, a moment of humiliation, your brain doesn't care about your values. It cares about your survival. It hands control over to the amygdala, the part of your brain wired to detect threats. And from that moment, your body enters fight, flight, or freeze. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing gets shallow. Blood leaves the brain and floods the muscles. Logic shuts down. The body says, this is war, and in war mode, there is no reflection, no nuance, no growth. Just reaction, just primal survival. Now here's the dangerous part. Most men spend their entire lives in that state. They don't know how to pause. They don't know how to observe their inner world. They don't even notice the moment the amygdala hijacks them. They live in reactive mode, constantly defending, attacking, shutting down, or running away. But then the ego steps in, and the ego is terrified of looking weak. So what does it do? It overcompensates, it deflects, it mocks, it postures. It tries to prove something. This is why you see men explode over small things. Why they get cold during arguments. Why they go silent when they're hurt. It's not because they're broken. It's because no one taught them how to feel without falling apart. How to respond without reacting. But here's the thing. The men we admire most, the ones history remembers, are the ones who stayed grounded while everyone else lost their minds. We don't admire the man who gets loud. We admire the man who holds the line, the one who stays loyal to his values, even when his pride is screaming. And it's not just philosophical, it's strategic. Because in real life, in leadership, in relationships, in crisis, the most powerful man is the one who can stay calm. You don't trust the guy who's easily triggered. You don't follow the man who always needs to defend himself. You follow the man who's centered. The man who sees clearly when others panic. The man who listens while others shout. The man who thinks before he speaks. That's not weakness. That's emotional command. And in a world full of emotional chaos, calmness is power. Let's redefine something most men get completely wrong. What does it mean to be powerful? What does it mean to be masculine? For too long, we've been told it means domination, control, volume, status, winning every argument, being the alpha, outperforming, out-earning, out-muscling. But that's not power. That's performance. That's insecurity in disguise. Because real power, real masculine strength, isn't about controlling other people. It's about controlling yourself, your emotions, your impulses, your energy, not suppressing them, not pretending they don't exist, but guiding them, owning them, leading them. The men who are truly dangerous are not the loud ones, not the flashy ones. They're the quiet ones, the stable ones, the ones who can walk into chaos and not flinch. They don't need to intimidate. They don't need to seek validation. They don't need to explain themselves over and over again. Why? Because they are rooted. And that rooting, that emotional sovereignty, determines everything. It determines how you show up in relationships. Do you explode under pressure, or do you hold space? Do you blame when things go wrong, or do you own your part? It determines how you lead. Do people follow you out of fear or out of trust? It determines whether you grow or repeat the same emotional cycles for the next 10 years. You don't become a respected man by overpowering others. You become respected when you learn to govern yourself. There's a saying from military training: you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. That applies here. When life hits you hard, when your buttons are pressed, you don't suddenly become your ideal self. You fall to your habits, to your emotional patterns, to whatever inner structure you've built or haven't built. And if you haven't built the discipline of calmness, you'll fold, you'll lash out, you'll say things you regret, you'll act out your wounds instead of standing in your wisdom. So here's the framework to train that calmness. 3 things, 3 identity traits you build every day before the storm comes. 1. Observe before reacting. When something triggers you, don't respond immediately. Just pause. Even 3 seconds. That gap between what happens and how you respond is everything. It's where the strongest version of you has a chance to speak. You don't control the trigger, you control the gap. And that gap is where choice lives, where power lives, where men are separated from boys. When you pause, you disrupt the autopilot. You put your higher mind back in charge. And instead of being a slave to your nervous system, you become the architect of your response. 2. Name what you feel, not what you fear. Most men skip this step. They feel discomfort, and they go straight into reaction. But if you can pause and name it, you take away its control. You say, I feel disrespected, I feel threatened, I feel hurt, and suddenly, you've named the emotion. You've made it conscious. And once something is conscious, it becomes workable. When you name it, you reduce its grip. You stop being driven by fear and start moving from awareness. Because the emotion isn't the enemy. The confusion around the emotion is. 3. Lead with principle, not pressure. This is where your identity is shaped. When you're triggered and the storm is building inside, ask yourself, what would the strongest version of me do right now? Not the most reactive, not the most comfortable, the strongest. That version of you has values, standards, clarity. He doesn't betray those values under pressure. He honors them. And when you make a decision from that place, from values, not emotion, you build something far more important than confidence. You build character, and character is what earns you self-respect, which is what makes others respect you. Not the volume of your voice, but the weight of your presence. So here's what I want you to do now. Not as a viewer, but as a man. I want you to reflect on a moment where pressure got the best of you. Maybe it was recent, maybe it was years ago. But think back to that moment. What happened? How did you respond? What did it cost you? And now ask yourself, if I had paused, if I had named what I felt, if I had led with principle instead of pressure, how would that moment have changed? And maybe you've also had a moment where you did stay calm, where the version of you you're proud of showed up. What did that feel like? How did it affect the people around you? Share it below. Because that story, whether it's a win or a mistake, might be the mirror another man needs right now. You never know who's watching, and one reflection can shift a mindset. This is how we sharpen each other. Not through performance, but through presence, through honesty, through leading ourselves together. Stillness, presence, discipline. These aren't buzzwords. They're the foundation of a man who's ready for war, internal war,